So you're thinking it's time to buy a property, but you just don't know where to start. And trust me, you don't want to get into something like this totally unprepared because you could potentially miss out on your dream property. From my experience, these are 5 of the most important things that you need to know and do before you begin your search. So let's get right into it. First, you need to have a good credit score. I had an idea of what a credit score was, but I didn't really know how it tied into getting a mortgage and how it worked. Because I didn't really have a need to think about having a good credit score, what was I going to do anyway at 20? Get a mortgage on minimum wage? Yeah, of course. But when it was time for me to actually look for properties, I began to read up about credit scores, and that's when I realized that this is something really important and I should have really been building up my credit score over the years. But wait a minute, what is a credit score? A credit score is a number that shows lenders how good you are at managing your money and paying back what you owe. It helps the banks and other lenders decide if they should give you the loan or the credit cards that you applied for. This score is usually based on things like if you can pay your bills on time, how much you owe, and how long you've had credit. The 3 main credit rating agencies in the UK are Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. And in the US, they are S&P, Moody's, and Fitch Group. And they all have a different credit rating system, so what is considered a good score will vary from one agency to the next. I'll put the amounts on the screen so you can come back to it whenever you want. And why do we need a good credit score? Well, because having a good credit score shows lenders that you are a reliable person and that you can pay your loans back on time. So they will offer you the best rates available, knowing that you'll be able to pay them back. When it comes to purchasing a property, you'll need a good credit score in order to secure a good deal on your mortgage. What do I mean by a good deal? Let's say you have an excellent score of 950 plus and the mortgage rates currently are 4%, just an example. Then you'll be offered the lowest rate available, which will be the 4%. But if your score is not that great, let's say it's between 550 to 720, then you'll get a mortgage deal, but at a higher rate, like 4.5%. And if you have a really bad score, then your mortgage application might be rejected, or you'll have to accept a deal with a ridiculously high interest rate like 7%. And trust me, you want the better deal because the interest on these mortgages are a wealth killer. You don't want to become a cash cow for the banks. You should only really get a loan when you really need it and at the best rate that you can find. Here's how much of a difference the percentages make. If you take out a mortgage of 100k for 25 years with an interest rate of 4.5%, your mortgage payments per month would be £556 and you'll have to pay 66,000 in interest over 25 years. If you take out the same mortgage but with a higher interest rate of 7%, sure, your mortgage payments would only increase by £151 per month, but you pay back almost double in interest over 25 years, 112,000 to be exact. But don't worry, here's how you can boost your credit score. There are 2 ways in which you can increase your credit score. For the first method, you will need to open up a credit card, but not just any credit card. This is a credit card that's purely made for credit building. This is by far the fastest way to build your credit score, and if you do it right, you can get your score up in about 3 to 6 months. You can use a comparison site like Money Supermarket to find the best credit building card available to you right now. Once you've applied for the card and you've received it, here's what you need to do. You need to manage your regular payments through this card only. So you need to set up your direct debits to go through this credit card and just make sure that you pay your bills on time. For instance, if your bill is £80, then pay that £80 in full before you incur any charges because the interest rates on these credit cards are pretty high. You will need to do this whole process 3 to 6 months before your mortgage application because building a good credit score usually takes about 3 to 6 months. It took me around that time as well to get mine to an acceptable amount. This second method didn't even cross my mind until I read up about it. Did you know that being registered to vote actually improves your credit score? Because I didn't know that. Apparently it's because it confirms your identity and your address, which makes it easier for banks to do anti-fraud checks on you. Well, there you go. Once you've improved your credit score, the next step would be to determine what you can afford. The affordability of the house depends on 2 things. Number 1 is how much money you can borrow from the bank as a mortgage. And number 2 is the deposit that you've saved up. This will give you a rough idea of the price range that you need to be looking at. You're able to borrow up to 4.5 times your salary as a mortgage. Some lenders might stretch this to 5 times your salary, but let's stick to 4.5 times. So first you need to take your salary and multiply that by 4.5. As an example, if you earn 60K, multiply that by 4.5, and you can borrow up to 270K. There are also two other ways in which you can check how much you can borrow. The first way is to use a mortgage calculator. Usually you'll find this on the lender's website. Let's use Barclays as an example. You can search up Barclays borrowing calculator. You can choose a number of applicants. We'll just stick to one. Put in your income, your spending, and the reason for mortgage and a deposit amount. And this will calculate how much you could borrow. The second way is to get a mortgage in principle. This is a more personalized estimate of how much you can borrow, and it's completely free. You can either do this yourself through the lender's website or through a mortgage broker, but we'll get to that later on. One thing to take a note of is that different lenders have different names for this mortgage in principle. Some people call it agreement in principle, and some people a decision in principle. But it's all the same thing. And bear in mind that at this point, the amount that you get quoted is just an estimate, and it could change when you apply for a mortgage. Next up, you need to add up all the deposits that you've saved up. Typically, lenders will need you to have at least 10 to 15% deposit. So if you're looking at a 300K property, then you'll need at least 45K to put down as a deposit. On top of that, you need to set aside 3K just for like solicitors fees and stuff like that. So in this case, with a 60K salary, we could potentially take out a 270K mortgage, put down a 45K deposit, which gives us a value of 315K. This gives you a ballpark of what you can afford, but bear in mind there's a few other costs that you need to consider too, which we'll get to later in this video. The third step is to research the property market. You need to understand that house prices fluctuate much like shares do. The prices go up and down and is fueled by demand. And demand is affected by many things like population growth, changes in interest rates, the health of the economy, and the government policies. But unlike shares, the housing market is less volatile. And this housing market differs from area to area. If you're buying a property to live in, obviously you want the property's value to increase over time, especially if you're buying it for investment purposes. You'll need to research when and where exactly to buy your property. The area that you choose is really important. If a property is close to good schools, has good transport links, it's close to the city centers, there's less crime, and it's not on the main road, then those things could have a positive impact on the value and investment potential. And of course, if there's developments in the area, then you need to consider how that's going to affect the desirability of the surrounding areas. For example, if there are plans to build a new shopping mall or a cinema in the area, then your property value could see an increase of up to 5%. And on the downside, if there are plans to build new flats in the area, then you're likely to see a drop in your property's value. I suggest that you go out to these areas that you're interested in and just have a browse around. If you find a potential location, then go to that location during the day and in the evening, just to get a feel for the area. You'll also get an idea of how busy the traffic gets during rush hour in those areas. This would also be a good time to go and find a mortgage broker to help you with your mortgage in principle. The reason why I recommend that you get your mortgage in principle through a broker is because the broker is able to go and get quotes from different lenders all at once and come back to you with the best rates. But if you're going to do this yourself, then you'd be wasting your time going to each lender one by one and filling out the application again and again. Using a broker at this point is free anyway, so you might as well use them and save yourself some time. And the fourth step is to have your bank statements and proof of deposit ready. It's better to be fully prepared before you start viewing properties, because when you want to put down an offer, the estate agents will usually ask you for the proof of deposit and your mortgage in principle. To get your mortgage in principle, you'll need to prepare some documents and send them off to the broker. You'll need to send them at least 3 months of your most recent bank statements and your payslips, also a credit report from a credit rating agency, and some form of identification, like a driver's license. The broker will also ask you a couple of questions around your income, expenses, how much deposit you have, and how much you're looking to borrow. Then they will take this information and go to the lenders and find you the best deals available on the market. And once again, this is all completely free. And finally, here are some other factors that you need to consider when buying your first property. A property that doesn't need renovating or modernizing will be a bit more expensive, and a property that is quite old and in need of some work, then they're much cheaper, but you need to have extra money to modernize it. And this can cost anywhere between 20 to 60,000 or even more, depending on how much work the property needs and what state it's in and how much the builders are going to quote you. So say if I find a really outdated 2-bedroom property and it's in a great location, close to London, and has good transport links, and it's relatively cheaper than the other properties in the area. Let's say they're asking for 350,000 on this property, and I go and view it, and based on the condition that it's in, I estimate that it's going to cost me about 50k to modernize it. And then I wouldn't really bother with this property because I would have to go find a builder, and it's such a big hassle, and it's really difficult to find a good builder these days. And if you've ever had to deal with builders, then you'll know how much of a headache they are. It's pretty traumatic from my experience. I would have to deal with their nonsense until they're finished, and this could take months. Instead, I would just increase my budget by 50k and look at properties that are worth 400k. That doesn't need that much work, and I can move right into it. That's if I have the money, of course. Bear in mind, you'll also need to put money aside for things like stamp duty and as well as some fees. If you're a first-time buyer in the UK, then you don't pay stamp duty on the first 425k on a residential property. And the fees include surveyor's fees, valuation fees, and legal fees. And these fees should only come up to about 2.5 to 3k. And of course, you're not going to live in an empty house and sleep on the floor. You're going to need some money for furniture and other home essentials. Once you've done all these 5 things, then you're fully prepared to start viewing properties and putting down your first offer. If you've enjoyed this video, then please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next video.